Hi, y'all. Welcome to the GradMissions Office Hours podcast. I'm Autumn, CEO and founder of GradMissions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liza Carlson, and I work with our law clients here at GradMissions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Stevens, and I work with our curriculum and our essay lab.
Hi everyone, I'm Logan Lockhart and I work with our med students.
Hi, everyone. I am Morgan Hager, and I am client success for both our law and med students. And today we're going to talk about something that is relevant for both law and med students and also relevant for the current timeline, and that is letters of recommendations. And so, who wants to jump in and tell us what actually is a letter of recommendation?
I love these omnivorous kind of podcast episodes because I hear from law clients all the time that they skip through the med episodes. I hear from med students that they skip through the law ones. But here's one where we can all hold hands and link arms and talk about this uphill struggle that can be letters of rec. LOR. You'll hear lots of acronyms said that way. And the great thing about LOR is there are some real universal truths that apply to getting letters of rec in both of these spaces, and just some good general rules of thumb. There are a few guidelines that I would follow for requesting letters of recommendation, whether you are pursuing law school or med school. And that is, we're recording this at the end of April 2026. This is the perfect time to get your letters of rec together, especially those academic letters of recommendation, because your professors get very nomadic after graduation. And even if you're not a graduating senior, it doesn't matter. Like, you are going to need these letters this summer, and your professor is going to be backpacking across Europe. And so getting your request in now is one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you.
For sure.
And the letter of recommendation is basically just kind of an endorsement for you. It's in addition to your resume and your grades and your personal statement, but it is the letter of recommendation. It's the recommender's view of you and not your view of yourself. And so I think it's something that is really great to really think through as to who you want to write these letters. It's not
Mhm.
just you need to be really selective in
Yes.
this
Yeah.
process.
Yes. I always tell people, if you're a traditional student and you're currently in school or you've been out of school a short amount of time, having someone in the academic space is very, very important. These letters, like you said, Morgan, they're to endorse you as a student, and the schools want to see that you are teachable and that you show up and you have some skin in the game. And so having someone in the academic space is very important. Now, if you're non-traditional, you've been out of school a while, someone that has still can speak to your teachability, so a supervisor, a mentor, someone like that is going to be really, really helpful. And one thing I always say, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun, but it does not have to be a big name to carry a lot of weight. It can
That's true.
sometimes do the opposite, where, say you're a law client and your aunt's bridge club friend has a brother who is a really big judge and a senator and, all these things. We on the admissions committee will be able to tell that it's a form letter. And so that big name, it doesn't really matter if they don't know you. Now, if
That's
you
right.
worked directly for that cousins, brothers, whomever, and they actually get to know you, then absolutely they can write the letter. But someone who knows you very well, that you've been in office hours, that you've gone to them for advice, they've overseen a project that you have done, and they can speak to your work ethic and your credibility and your character, that is going to carry substantially more weight than a big name. Because, we always talk about Reddit and just the whisperings of the pre-law clubs and the pre-med clubs, it has to be this big person, big name, and that's not necessarily true.
That's right.
I love that, Lizzie. And that's actually what sparked the interest in this podcast this week is in my inbox, I had one of our current clients ask me that specific question. Who is better to write this? And my answer was just like yours. It's the one who knows you and knows who can speak to you because you don't want that generic letter. You want a very well thought out, supportive letter as to why you're the best candidate for their law admissions. So.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think it's really helpful when you're reaching out to these folks that know you, that you share a little bit about, you do a little reminder. Here's how we know each other. If you're like, well, I have some professors that I went to office hours, don't have anyone I did research with, or my academic connection is a little light. If you're looking at it and looking back and saying, I was in class and I was a good student and I did talk and engage with these instructors, remind them of a project you worked on or a conversation you had or something that will bring back that tie if you're working kind of a light connection. But I also think academic doesn't have to be only in the classroom. It can be organizations that you were involved in. It can be, that side of the academic house, leadership experiences or things like that. They can speak to your work ethic. They can speak to a lot of things that line up for the admissions committee with what kind of student you might be. Just by seeing you in an academic environment, knowing how committed you were to your grades while you were also committed to their organization or whatever it was that you were working with. That individual in the academic unit on. So maybe thinking about reminding that light academic connection and then reaching out to other sides of academic connections if it's not a faculty member specifically.
That's something we always recommend with our clients is educating your letter writers. That's your responsibility. They teach hundreds, thousands of students. And this is also true for supervisors, coworkers, mentors, whoever else may be writing your letter of recommendation. Sending them your personal statement, sending them your resume or your list of activities and experiences. Because if you think about your application this way, your personal statement, perspective statement, supplemental secondary essays tell the admissions committee who you are. Your resume and your activities and experiences are the receipts to prove it. And these letters are the cosign. Yep, everything they said in the application is true. And the strongest sort of combination of these things working in concert really is buffeted by a letter of recommendation writer who has been properly educated on what they're co-signing.
As a continuation of that, I think this is a continuation of your storytelling.
Mm.
I think assigning each letter writer a role,
Mm-hmm.
In the med space, your science faculty can show your intellectual horsepower. If you have a physician, they can show your clinical presence. If you have a PI because you've done research, they can show your intellectual curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a mentor, they can show your leadership and character. But like you said, it's up to you to kind of define to them what they have seen in you to help continue to tell your story in these letters.
That's right. That's right. And so some really good advice that we have when we work with, especially our younger clients or our folks who sign on right out of high school as they start their freshman year, is going to office hours, making sure that these professors can pick you out of a giant lecture hall, setting a calendar reminder once a semester to send a 2 to 3 line email to the professors who you felt the most connection with, who you think eventually you might ask for an LOR from, to just say, hey, that specific chemistry concept that I struggled with that we worked out in office hours, boy, it has come back in Orgo too. It has come back in biochemistry. Thank you for just taking that time. All of us who have worked in education, we know just how much that thank you means. Like, we work in education not for the dollars, y'all. I guarantee we work in education because we like to work with students. And so when you've sent those kind of follow-up thank yous, pop into office hours every now and then, like take them a coffee, make that connection, first of all, because that's what professionals do. That's what grown-ups do. It's called networking. Second of all, because then when you do ask them for that letter of recommendation, it doesn't feel transactional. They actually know. And when you reach out to that person, med or law, and ask them about writing a letter of recommendation, first of all, ask if they can write a positive letter, because maybe you're remembering your experience in their classroom a lot different than they are. I have read some really non-positive letters of recommendation before, and it gives me pause. First of all, I think that's, we were talking about that before we hopped on the podcast. It's not a super ethical thing. If you're someone who's writing a letter of recommendation and someone asks you to write a letter, you should probably say, no, I'm not able to write a positive one, or I'm too busy. You can make up an excuse. So I do think some of that's on the letter writer, but it also gives me pause about the student. Like, are you really that socially unaware that you don't realize that person was not going to have good things to say? Is that really the strongest recommender you can think of? It just sort of gives me pause about their judgment.
I feel like a lot of the processes are a little more cut and dry with the law school experience, at least on my side. And so typically schools will say 2 to 3 letters. There are some schools that say four, but it's typically two, optional three. And my joke at GradMissions is nothing is optional. So if they say optional three, you're going to get three.
That's right. With the
And
fourth one waiting in the wings for a letter of
yes,
continued interest down the line.
just in case you're having, that's a great, that's great, Autumn, because there will be a professor who goes off on sabbatical, or you don't hear from in the summer, and you're scrambling to find another one. So yes, an alternate, at least in your mind as you're brainstorming and thinking about this, absolutely, so that you're not scrambling and like the last bit of your app is tracking down a letter writer. Nobody wants that. We have seen that before.
Yes.
So typically two, three, four, and like I said earlier, someone in the academic field. And Lori brought up that great point. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who taught you directly. It can be an advisor of an organization, or some. But again, you know them well, and then it can be, again, they don't tell, there's no parameters, but always an academic person, maybe even two, and then a supervisor or a mentor. Again, someone who gave you direction, taught you something, and you rose to the occasion. And then the other, can I say this? Please don't let it be your mom or your
Oh
aunt,
my gosh.
because that
Yes.
has happened.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but it can be someone in social spheres, or if you work for a nonprofit and you have someone, a teammate, a coworker.
Mm-hmm.
I always loved a letter from someone that you advocated for in some
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. We've
Um,
seen that.
yeah,
We have a
it,
client right now who works in the human trafficking space, and anti.
yeah,
She's anti-human trafficking.
yeah,
Heavens. This is not that kind of podcast.
yeah,
And she had someone who she helped get out of a really sticky situation. We had to translate that LOR into from Spanish to English. And I think that's such a powerful, I've had, teachers have the parents of their students write an LOR. Coworkers are another really good one.
yeah,
Sometimes it's sticky if you're a non-trad and your boss doesn't know you're applying to law school.
yeah.
Well, can you have a coworker or a team member or someone like that? That's fine.
Yeah, I love utilizing that third as something creative.
Yeah.
Obviously giving that person parameters.
Mhm.
But again, as we've talked about in this podcast, a great application has a personal narrative throughout every piece.
Mhm.
It's this beautifully written story. So if you've written your personal statement about working in anti-human trafficking, how wonderful to have a victim that you advocated for as one of your letter writers.
Yeah.
It tells me that you didn't just pop in and out of that organization, or you really, really cared and were passionate about that. And again, as we've spoken about before, we would rather have you really 100% into one thing than just dabbling in 10 different things, thinking that it looks great on a resume.
That's right.
So that letter writer and that letter really just shows me that you were very much committed to what you have on your resume. You weren't just filling in some blanks. So yeah, that's kind of would be my guidance on what to do. And again, please don't have your mom write one because that has happened and it's awkward.
If you're an athlete of any kind, even if
Yeah,
it's
coach.
intramurals, even if it's you were a high school athlete and then maybe you just play for fun, I love a coach letter because there's a work ethic, there's a grit. If you were a collegiate athlete, it's imperative because I'm guessing probably your GPA is probably a little bit lower than it would have been if you were at full horsepower academically. Having that coach talk about you is so, so beneficial. There's there's a law school, I think it's actually an LSAT prep company who has recently broken out into tiers, TIERS, like the extracurriculars that they rank. So it's like these are the top tier, these are the second tier, third tier, fourth tier. And they're totally bogus. Like they really are. So they have like a military experience and college athlete in like the third or fourth tier. And I'm telling you, as someone who has sat on admissions
Yeah.
committees and has consulted with admissions committees for law and med schools across the United States, if you're a student athlete, that is headline news, and they know what that means instantly. They know what the work ethic looks like. They know the tenacity, the rigor, the academic just stress that you're under to
Yeah.
manage your practices and your philanthropic events that you have to do with your academics. So A coach letter is great. Also fine to kind of ghostwrite that letter and send it to the coach and say, could you say something like this? Because
Yeah, for
sometimes
sure.
that's not their strength. But that's for law or med. A coach letter is really strong.
And being headline news, it's gonna we're as we work with you on your resume, that's gonna be towards the top of that resume. And
Yes,
then so
above the
top of
fold.
the resume, and then in your letter, like it's all just gonna come together so beautifully. So yeah.
I will also say on the hiring side, whenever a big law firm sees an athlete on there, they're probably going to allow your GPA to be a little bit lower
Mhm.
because exactly what Autumn said, the team player aspect of it, the like that speaks volumes going forward.
Yep.
And if you're able to be successful on a team, especially as a collegiate athlete, then they already know that you're kind of ahead. You're ahead of the game. And so I think a coach one is a wonderful one. When we talk about the academic writer, does it need to be someone who can speak to what skills do we need it to be? Does it need to be writing? Does it need to be, what if you're a science major that's going into law?
Teachability is the number one goal. Teachability. My favorite letter writer can talk about your growth from the start to the finish of that class or from Orgo 1 to Orgo 2, what they saw happen. Um, can do a lot of lifting when it comes to buoying a lower GPA, both for med and law, to have an academic person speak to the kind of student that they're getting in med school or law school and what that transition has looked like. Specific skills are okay, but people who teach at law and med schools and are reading these applications know that the kind of learning you have to do at law and med school are very different and that they're going to teach you. What they need to know is that you're willing to learn.
I love that. So we've talked about law, and it seems as if the law is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And as Logan has said, once you know one med school, you know one med school. And so Logan, I think the med school LORs are also a little varied as well. Can you give us a little idea of how that works for the students?
Yeah, of course. It can never be simple in med. It just that's not the brand.
No.
I will say, Autumn, you opened this by saying it's nice when we get a topic where we can all hold hands, and that's true, and that also includes the residency space because you'll also be asking for
Yes.
letters of rec in the residency space, primarily individual letters from, your program director in the specialty you're applying to, the clerkship director, maybe the dean of the school, depending on what your relationship is. If you worked with any faculty that you really stood out to on an away rotation, those are all examples of individual letters, which that's the type of letter that you could submit in your residency application. You can also submit those individual letters on a medical school application, but of course, that's not always the way. Autumn, will you talk to us a little bit about the committee letter and what you have seen when it comes to committee letters?
Yeah, committee letter is also sometimes called a faculty packet. And this works differently at different med schools. I have some shiny stars. Auburn, you're my favorite. You're my number one. If I had a kid who wanted to go to med school, I would send them to Auburn all day long because they're cranking out people who are ready. They come to us and they hardly even need us. They need us, but they're as ready as they can be. There are other undergraduate institutions where the access to that LOR experience is so competitive and you almost need a sponsor to sort of watch it for you like a coach. So the committee letter faculty packet is something that some schools offer. If you are a freshman, sophomore in undergrad right now, this is a good thing to go ahead and just and find out. Email your pre-med advisor, your pre-health advisor, your science, go to your favorite science professor and say, do we do a committee packet or a committee letter or a faculty packet? Because if they do, you need to know when that application opens, when you sign up for it, you need to know what's involved, what you have to have ahead of time. This is not something you can last minute. And for schools who provide this, med schools in the area know that a committee packet, a faculty letter is available. And if you don't have it, it can be a little bit of a yellow flag. Like, why didn't you have your act together? Why don't we have this committee packet from you? So what it is it's a gathering of the science and math faculty at that undergraduate institution, and they have come together and created some gauntlet that they would like for you to run through. And they have a form you fill out. They have some different application pieces they want you to submit to them. And then some of them even involve an interview where you actually go through an interview with that committee of faculty members. And then they collectively submit a letter on your behalf so that you don't have to go, you know, office to try to find the person that's going to write your letter. You kind of do it all in one fell swoop. And then they provide that letter directly to your med schools, and that satisfies the academic piece of that. At some schools, it also satisfies, your supervisors that you can include your external LORs too. So the doctors you've shadowed, mentors, things like that, and they put it all into one packet. It's like I said, it's done a little bit different at every school. The most important thing that you need to pay attention to is whether or not your school does offer this. And if they do, it needs to be on your calendar, an alarm on your phone so that you don't miss the sign up.
How early do they offer that to students?
It's usually sophomore or junior year.
So it's fairly early.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you are a non-science major, can you still go through that process?
It's different at different schools. So
Okay.
some of them are going to want to see your MCAT score first, and they may decline a committee packet to you if your MCAT score hasn't hit that school's minimum. I have definitely seen that happen before. That doesn't mean that you still can't apply to med school, especially if your school really drives folks to MD and you're planning to apply DO. There's duct tape and baling wire that we can figure it out. But optimally, you're hitting the benchmarks that they want you to hit, and you're getting that faculty packet.
So we've talked a lot about how it's different at different schools. Certainly that's the case in undergrad. It's also the requirements are also different at each med school you apply to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering what the details are in terms of the med schools that you're applying to, all of that information is in MSAR. It's under the admissions tab. If you have a subscription to MSAR, and it'll tell you there's always a minimum and a maximum number of letters. Minimum number to submit, maximum number to submit. And then it'll also tell you their preference and say, if you submit one committee letter, that takes the place of the 3 individual letters that we would ask you for otherwise. And that's written differently on every single school's MSAR page, but that would be the first place that I would check to see what your school is requiring. You can also in AMCAS, if you are going to submit individual letters for whatever reason that might be, that also might be because you're a non-traditional student, which we didn't really touch on. But if you're going the individual letter route, you can upload up to 10 in AMCAS. Now, you're not submitting 10 anywhere. I would say most schools have a max of 4, maybe 5, but 4 is what I see most often.
Mm-hmm.
But you can upload 10 because you can submit different letters to different schools depending on, if you really want to showcase your research prowess, you could submit a letter from a PI to one school. But if you're applying to another school that research isn't really their thing, you'd rather submit your, I don't know, character and leadership or, clinical presence or something like that, you can assign that to a different school. So that's, again, just kind of part of that strategy and storytelling that you can customize based on what school you're applying to.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a letter writer who is a prestigious alum from a specific school, this is med or law, it might be strategic to have them write a school-specific letter. Now, if you have a school-specific letter, make sure it only gets assigned to that school because you don't want Columbia reading a letter from Yale. Like, that's not going to be a good look. And sort of like mentioning the wrong school in your personal statement. Don't mention a school in your personal statement. But it can be strategic. There's another little strategy that I'm going to give you because you listened all the way to the end of this podcast. If you have one of these, power play letters of recommendation, it's a big name, it's a big donor, it's a politician, it's a star of some sort that has an affiliation with that school. Strategic to, include it in your AAMC or in your LSAC application, LOR. Also have them email the president of the university or the dean of the med or law school directly, because those leaders care about those names. Those leaders love to think they played a part in building the class. And that doesn't mean that you call the president and say, well, I know this person and you should admit me to your law school or med school. That's not the way. We know that a true VIP comes from the president calling and begging me, where are we on Lysian's application? I really want to get her in because, Garth Brooks, local celebrity, emailed and is really interested in her getting into law school and he's going to, be a big donor. But is this ethical? 100% no. Does this happen? 100% yes. It's on post-it notes in the admissions office of every school in this country. So if you have a VIP, use it.
Yep. And again, it's an endorsement. You don't talk
Exactly.
about it. Let them talk about you for you.
That's right.
But let it be that endorsement, not you doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you also have to have the stats to back it up because
Yep.
I cannot tell you how many times I had to fend off an angry president or dean and the student had deeply below medians. And I'm like, I mean, if they want to invest, maybe invest in some LSAT prep because this is not going to happen. Okay, this has been a great episode. I have an anxious med student in the waiting room, so I'm going to have to bounce. Our lights are on socials at grad_missions, anywhere you can find us. And we hope you are able to secure your LOR before your faculty members scatter. Bye, y'all.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye.